Hi there, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about creating healing, but before I can do that, I need to talk about how we create illness. So I want to give you an example using a situation that had presented itself to me recently, and of course I always have permission to share when I'm sharing something like this. So if we look at how we're handling our day-to-day experience in life, we have to look at all facets of that, how we're interacting with others outside of ourselves, and then how we're reacting, acting within the realm of our personal attention to ourselves, right? So that means self-love. So if we are not having success in navigating our connection with relationships with others, then we might find ourselves feeling frustrated, feeling grief or sadness in the connection that we have in some of those relationships. And the important thing there is how we're then relating that information to ourselves. So let's say we have a falling out with somebody, we're not in a good place, and that falling out makes us sad because this was a person we enjoyed being around, but there was always difficulty in the relationship presenting. And so at one point they came to us and said, listen, I can't be your friend anymore. I don't want to see you or hang out with you, right? And we would look at that, most of us, and take that in and say, well, I must have done something wrong that created that dynamic to which now they do not want to associate with me. So there must be something wrong with me. And then that information is what we keep telling ourselves over and over again each time this scenario or dynamic happens in our lives. And after a while, it impacts our relationship energetic center in the body, which would be the heart. And in that area, we also have the lungs, and the lungs hold grief, sadness. And so when we are dealing with a situation like that, we might be telling ourselves we're not a good friend, or we are not capable of having good relationships with others. And in doing that and perceiving ourselves as less than, we're taking that information, those thoughts which are electric and those emotions which are magnetic, and then we're bringing them into the center that those thoughts are connected to. And those thoughts are connected to the heart center, because that heart center is about our relationship with others, right? So the heart represents one thing, the breast represents something different, but the lungs are where we carry grief and sadness. And so in this dynamic, we might be creating a chronic cough to get our attention, that we need to make some changes in the way that we're handling our experience with other people. Or we may be creating chronic uh, illness like colds, wet lungs, right? So when we have wet lungs, wet means, for me, water is about emotions. So it means that we're crying internally and not crying externally, right? And so if we're not treating ourselves in a different manner and looking at the reality of this is a relationship that is probably not meant to be in our life. It's not for our highest good. And if this other person is leaving, then that's on them. And there's a reason why they feel that they need to leave. But it's not necessarily because we're a bad person or we've done anything wrong. Maybe they want us to do something that we're not comfortable doing. So there's a huge dynamic here that we have to take a look at as we're assessing this scenario. But the underlying reality in this is that if this person is desiring to end the friendship, then we have to look at that and say, okay, well, I'm deserving of a real friend, a better friend anyway. And so I am going to be my own best friend and love myself and be okay with letting this relationship go. right? But most don't do that. Most would take on the program of lack and run the program of lack, that I'm no good, there must be something wrong with me. They don't want to be my friend anymore, right? And so if we're not in our awareness of what's transpiring in our reality and understanding that we're presenting an opportunity to create a problem with our lungs or to manifest sadness and continue to manifest sadness, because if you go back and watch my video on vibrational currency, and you'll see that we attract in whatever it is that we are presenting in our electromagnetic field. So whatever frequency we're operating at is what we're attracting in. So if you're operating at a low vibration where you don't have any self-love and you are perceiving yourself as not good enough, not deserving, then you're going to attract in people that are going to give you that experience and treat you the way that you are thinking you are, right? So if you think that you're not worthy of someone good in your life, then that person that's not going to be good for you is who you're going to attract in. And that's just how it works on an energetic level, right? And then if we keep doing this, let's say we're engaged in a relationship we just are not willing to let go of or can't imagine letting go of, then eventually that grief could turn into a worse situation. So at some point, it's not a cold anymore. So maybe we've manifested some kind of a lung condition where we're having now some trouble breathing, or in worst case scenario, we have run this program of not being good enough so intently and for so long, right? Because this is how we do. This is a story that we play out, that we tell ourselves. We go into victimhood and we're telling the story of not being good enough, and I can never attract the right person in my life. And maybe we're doing that for such a long time that that grief really takes a stronghold in our body and our lungs, and all of a sudden we create something heavy like cancer, right? And cancer is a disease in which we're perceiving ourselves as not good enough. It's a disease that I associate with shame, whether it's a small amount of shame, right? Feeling that we're not deserving, that we're not worthy, that we're not good enough, or that maybe we were a bad person or didn't do something the right way, or maybe it was the transaction of the other person that made us feel shame, right? Somebody shamed us in some way, right? But if you take cancer and let's say it turns into lung cancer, and that grief that is creating the lung cancer is not healed, is because the individual that has that lung cancer is not in their awareness of how that illness is being created, then that frustration with the lung condition that they have might turn into anger, because, after all, they may be looking at this like, I'm a good person, I don't deserve this, but now I have this lung condition, and I have so much anger because I have this lung condition. I don't understand, why can't I just have a good friend, a good relationship, a good partner, a good job, a good whatever, right? And then the next thing you know, that frustration that they're feeling from the grief and sadness of now their lungs being compromised with cancer becomes even rooted more. And then in that cancer rooting even more, it targets the next place in the body where they're holding the next level of emotion. And so it goes from feeling that lack program running out, where they're feeling like they're not deserving or they're not good enough, to anger and frustration and resentment at how life is treating them and how things are transpiring for them. And that anger would go to the liver, perhaps, because the liver is the organ that holds the energy of anger, frustration, and resentment. And maybe that cancer will metastasize in the liver. And then if that anger is still not resolved and there is still no emotional work done to heal the situation that's occurring in their life, then that cancer might metastasize again and form in the bones or the spine. And when I look at bones, I see that bones are the structure, especially the spine is the backbone of life for us, and how we are supported by our life or in our life or the people around us in our life. So do you see this whole thing playing out, this whole thing transpiring with how that cancer can then manifest and be created in another area because we have not done the work to heal what we perceive as something being wrong with us, right? And it all started with the thought that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of a friendship, people keep leaving me, when that's not the case. That is what you came here as a soul to experience in this incarnation, because your lesson perhaps could be that you need to understand what it means to be your own best friend, to be your own love first. And then when you understand what it's like loving yourself fully to the highest degree possible, then the love of your life will present, or perhaps you will find those friends that are more like your soul family, your soul sister, right? So this is only one scenario that I'm presenting, okay? This one scenario is unique to the one individual person that presented in this case study, this case situation for healing. And so what is creating their issue might be something different that's creating yours. And I am hoping it is not cancer, right? Because that would be at the worst case scenario, or another illness like MS or any kind of autoimmune issues, Parkinson's disease, anything like that. But this is what happens when we are not navigating our energy to the best of our ability, and we are running these old programs from these old stories that we continue to tell ourselves. We're creating this energy block in our system, and eventually we start to feel bad. We're not feeling good, right? I remember when my mom had cancer, and she had called me and she told me she had CLL, chronic lymphocyte leukemia. And when I looked at that and I looked at her situation and her level of unhappiness in her life with my father, because so much had changed so quickly in their lives, and it wasn't anything my mom would have bargained for. This was created by a job situation with my father, and it required them selling their house and moving, and so she was just not happy in her life anymore. And leukemia is a blood disorder, and when I see a blood disorder, blood circulates through the body. So that immediately told me that my mom was having difficulty with the way that she was circulating through life, and what life was presenting to her was no longer feeling good for her, right? So that required then some shifting in her thought patterns, in her thoughts that she was holding, in her belief system, right? To swap out those limiting beliefs, those old programs that she was running. And at the same time, it required that she start to pay attention to her body. She start to value her body, love her body, and in that moment, love herself. Because if she wasn't getting the love or the nurturing outside of herself, then it was her that was going to have to step up to the plate. It was the same thing when I had cancer in 2000. I had cervical cancer. And, that's in the root chakra. I was in survival mode. I was in fight or flight. And it was brought on because my husband had cheated on me, and I perceived myself as not being good enough, not being worthy. And this had been an ongoing affair that, he was having. And so I automatically took that in as me not being good enough, when it was not the case at all. It was him and his lack that he needed to step outside of the marriage. And so that was my first encounter with cancer. And so in that moment, I changed my diet, I changed my thoughts, but I still hadn't changed my thoughts enough, because even though I was eating healthy, I was going to the gym, I had lost like 96 pounds, and I was doing an amazing job of keeping myself together and looking amazing. I had not changed my thoughts enough. And in 2004, I found myself facing cancer again, right? So when we're in that challenge, it's presenting again as a crisis because we're needing to shift something. That's how I got into this work. That's how I became aware of healing at a deeper level. That is what I teach in my mentoring classes, because this is so important. It's so significant. I bring this through all of my classes and my information. It's so significant that we start to understand that we are responsible for us. We have to make the changes. When we stand up for us, then we can shift and change anything that we desire, right? And so it all starts within us. Everybody is on a different pathway. Everybody's on a different timeline. Even if you are in a relationship with someone that you perceive as your soulmate, that frequency that they are on is a different frequency from what you are on. It's a different soul path than what you're on. It's a different timeline than what you are on, right? We can be on very close timelines. We can be on a very similar path, but no two people are alike. It just is not possible because we all hold different frequencies. And so if you're not meshing up with somebody else, don't fret that. It's just an opportunity for you to look at where you're not loving yourself enough, right? So if you are struggling with an illness or something that is taking place physically within your body, and you're wanting to create healing for yourself, it has to start with you. You have to love yourself more. You have to be your best friend. You have to be your best lover. You have to be your best cheerleader, your best team player, your best everything, right? Because when you know how it feels to have someone who is totally on your side, totally gets you and is willing to do anything for you, that person is going to be you. Once you know how that feels because you've given that to you, nothing outside of that will you settle for. Nothing. You will not settle again, ever again. You will wait until that person shows up for you. And if they're not showing up for you, it's just meaning that you have to go deeper and deeper and deeper. That's how the work works, right? It's up to us to make the changes because we have the power. It's like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz when she clicked her ruby red crystal shoes together and she said, "Oh, I had the power all along." We all have the power. I don't care who you are. I don't care what race, what color, what religious denomination you are. We all have that power as divine co-creators with our universe. All of us. No one is any different from anybody else. It's how you're choosing to navigate your life, how you're choosing to operate your physical vessel. Are you willing to let yourself continue to get sick, or are you willing to do the work, jump in, be your own champion, be your own hero, and get the job done in your healing work? It's really up to you. It's not up to anybody else, right? So I hope something I said in this resonates with you. And if it does, I hope it sparks that healing for you, because we're all meant to have a magnificent, wonderful, magical, beautiful, infinite, abundant life. We're not here to suffer. That is a fallacy. I can't even tell you how untrue that is. It's one of those myths that just seems to keep circling around. We're here to have an amazing life and to experience what this life is like in its abundant state. And we can be abundant too as a divine co-creator with our universe if you trust your process, right? So know that I love you. I hope you have a magical day and that you take this in and make it an inside job, because it's all you, like it was all me. I love you. Bye-bye.